Hello guys and welcome to another video about how to Grimdark or horror team your D&D campaign. Now, this is a follow-on video from a previous one that I did where I gave 5 basic tips on how to Grimdark horror team your D&D campaign. And I explained in that video how important injuries are to help you build an aura of deterioration for your characters. So, I've explained that characters are deteriorating assets, that as they become more powerful, they become more damaged both in mind, body, and soul. But right now, today, we're going to talk about the body. And specifically, we're going to talk about this one particular module, which is my favorite. And this one is both available as a free PDF download, and for all you automation hogs like me, for Foundry, it is also available, which is why I've chosen this one, because I know how many people use D&D on Foundry. I know how many people appreciate free help to their campaigns. So this is why we're going to focus on this one. Maxwell's Manual of Malicious Maladies and Miraculous Medicine. Now, it says here it is a compendium of injuries and cures for the world's greatest role-playing game. Okay? So, moving into it, the content design item was done by a guy called Thomas Pfeiffer. I hope I'm saying that right. And the art, direction, and consultation was somebody called Lakeshia. Now, I love the art in this. First off, it reeks of like grimdark horror. Look at this kind of skeleton dude here. And if you scroll down, this is the guy here. I'm assuming this is Maxwell, the doctor, and they've gone with this long plague mask, which is a long-standing symbol of grimdark horror. But to run through the introduction of it, welcome prospective students to Maxwell's Manual of Malicious Maladies and Miraculous Medicine. I am the distinguished surgeon Maxwell Gonzalez, perhaps, though you may have heard of me from my popular moniker Maxwell Haxwell, which is pretty good. In this comprehensive and, dare I say, preeminent guide, you will find descriptions of all manner of injury, physical, mental, spiritual, and arcane. I will take you on a sanguinary journey through a universe of traumatic possibility and illustrate how you, an industrious and clever budding surgeon, can wrest your companions from the foul-smelling maw of death and dismemberment. You will also find within a variety of cutting-edge surgeries, pun intended, which are guaranteed to get your compatriots back on their feet, especially if their feet were missing to begin with. But wait, my friend, there's more. When the worst happens, and you aren't around to prevent it, of course, maiming and dismemberment are no longer the end. Sadly, in D&D, they never really are, but moving on. Thanks to modern medical and magical technology, there are a variety of options described within to get your kickers back kicking and your snatchers back snatching. Brilliant. So, my young pupil, oil up your bone saw, sharpen your scalpel, and get those bandages boiling. It's time to save some lives. So, straight off the bat, you're getting a barber surgeon vibe there, right? Anyone who's played Warhammer Fantasy RP or anything along that kind of setting will know the barber surgeon is a place of absolute nightmare. Your character receives some sort of debilitating shoulder wound, and they go into this dingy little wooden building in the middle of the city that's covered in sawdust all over the ground to soaking up dried blood, and there's a bucket in the corner of like chopped off arms and limbs, and the place is completely foul smelling, and you've got this terrifying doctor, well, allegedly a doctor. I mean, they call it barber surgeon because they cut. That's pretty much all they do. Leeches, draining, amputation. So you get that vibe from this. It's a very primitive form of surgery. It's not going to be something that's like, you're not going to be an open brain surgery on someone. Now, how to use this book. The book is organised into 3 parts. The first part is a series of tables describing lingering injuries based on the 13 different damage types. Now, that's interesting, okay? 13 different damage types. Acid, bludgeoning, cold, fire, force, lightning, necrotic, piercing, poison, psychic, radiant, slashing, and thunder. That's every damage type in D&D. That's pretty good. I've seen some tables before where it doesn't take a damage type into consideration. So, I mean, I once saw it roll a d20 and, you get a shoulder injury, but there's no detail on how an acid splash would differ from a warhammer crashing into your shoulder, Each table has a variety of injuries, conditions, and effects that increase the risk of combat and provide interesting and dire narrative opportunities. The second part is a system for characters to perform surgery. Surgery is a new and unique skill challenge that has the potential, with a bit of talent and luck, to treat some of the injuries described in the first section. The final section is a collection of mundane and magical items focused on accessibility and allowing options for adventurers with physical disabilities, which is pretty cool. Now, part 1, lingering injuries. I'm not going to read the entire thing out, but I'll read out parts I feel are relevant. And I think these particular 3 parts here that are highlighted in the bold are important to know before you use the system, okay? So it says here, overcome your limitations. Dungeons and Dragons is a game about narrative, creating problem solving and overcoming obstacles, okay? Whether it be an alchemist who paid an arm and a leg for his powers, a blind geomancer who sees through vibrations in the earth, a psionic professor confined to his wheelchair, or a blind attorney with his own version of justice, Daredevil, there are plenty of examples of characters in the media who never let their physical limitations stand in the way of their goals. Injuries are an opportunity for your characters to experience unique challenges and triumph over them. There is no injury so great that your character cannot be a hero. Now, essentially, this is selling the idea to your players of bringing an injury system in, okay? And sometimes that is required. You could sit there and go, injuries are part and parcel of a Grimdark campaign, of a horror-themed campaign, a dark or fantasy-themed campaign, but you have to sell the idea to your players that injuries are a good thing, okay? A lot of the times, especially if you're with a group that doesn't really do these kind of campaigns and you're looking to introduce it to your table, you know, you need to have that discussion. I've covered this in my last video, but you need to have that discussion. And the fact that it gives you a way in this book here to sell that to your players, that's very good, and it's very helpful, and it is 100% correct. You know, TTRPGs are about overcoming challenges as a team, in most cases as a team, and you know, lingering injuries and overcoming those limitations created during the campaign can present real opportunity for character development. But if your players think you're just introducing it for another way to deteriorate them, you know, without discussing the RP value it brings, you are going to be, you know, you are going to have a hard time selling that to them. So it's good to sell it to them in this light, you know. The next part is risk and reward, okay? Now, I've covered the value of risk and reward in my last video, and it is very, very crucial that players have that they can put into their brain where they're like, is this worth the reward, the risk I am taking? And you know, this is what injuries bring into it. When characters can seemingly heal from even the more grievous injuries with a full night's rest, sometimes it's difficult to maintain immersion. Completely agree with that. Lingering injuries provide an ever-present risk that any combat encounter will have a serious consequence. Even so, the lingering injury tables were designed so that the probability the most serious injuries, such as losing an arm, leg, vision, or hearing, are relatively small compared to that chance your characters will end up with a purely cosmetic scar. Now, I completely agree. The D&D system is not necessarily designed to incorporate this kind of... It's not designed to incorporate this kind of injury system, but it is malleable enough that you can bring it in. And no matter what anybody tells you, you can grimdark and horror team D&D. I've done it for years. You can do it with a little bit of homebrew, not a ton. And especially when you've got systems like this here to help you. Now, this next part is very important. Scars are fun. These charts give your players the opportunity to pick up purely cosmetic reminders of struggles past, some of which even have some unique properties. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second, okay? Giving a character a scar is an incredible way to bring the horrors of the past of the campaign back. You know, if somebody gets a horrible scar across their face fighting an eldritch horror that they encountered at a burnt-down orphanage, and you can see... You have NPCs look at that scar and bring it up to the player. They can relive that horror. You can say something to them like, as the scar is brought up in the conversation, you feel the the anxiety and the sweat on the back of your neck come back as you remember the smell of ash and brimstone in the air when the cycloptean horror rose from the remains of the Ty's chest. And you could just do it. And if you are in a situation where you feel you're losing that immersion at the table, you could do little things like that to pull it back, and just remind your players. Because I'm telling you, my players are a jolly bunch. They are a happy-go-lucky bunch of players. I love them to death. But sometimes I have to bring that immersion back and kind of not force it upon them, but kind of remind them what we're going for with the immersion. I love that they laugh. I love that they have fun. But they also, to their credit, do know that, when I'm trying to set an atmosphere, they fall into it. And it's little like things like that with scars and, ability, like injuries and that risk and reward factor that can really bring it back, But let's say give your players the opportunity to show off their battle scars in the local tavern. It's also very fun. Let your players laugh at the hideous scar one took when they were fighting rats at level 1. Now that they're fighting dragons at level 12, let your barbarian, who seems to take 90% of the party's damage, turn into a physical roadmap of your adventure history. It's brilliant. Scars are interesting ways to evolve your character's appearance and bookmark the memories of their past struggles. Past struggles equals current opportunities to set the tone. Remember that. Past struggles equals current opportunities to set the tone. Big tip for you right there, Anyway, moving on to surgical treatment. Now, surgical treatment is done in this as a separate skill. So you introduce it to your players as a separate skill. Now, I have used the Foundry model in my own campaign. I am unsure if it's added a surgery skill to the players. I don't believe it has. But this could be done in a number of ways. You could use any existing skills. The medicine skill check is there, for example. So you could just simply use a medicine skill check for it, just allowing them to have more capability with that skill and more options. But it says there are some injuries that potions, salves, and bandages just aren't enough for. Part 2 of this book describes surgery, a new skill challenge that allows your characters the chance to mitigate the effects of injuries they've taken. With some skill and luck, your characters will be able to reattach an arm severed by a mighty attack, remove an arrowhead left behind in the chest of a comrade, neutralize acid threatening to permanently damage the vision of the sharp-eyed rogue, and more. Surgery is not without its risks, however, and no surgery is guaranteed to be successful. That is, once again, risk and reward. It always comes back to risk and reward with Grimdark horror-themed campaigns. Because if there's no risk, the reward becomes meaningless. So with the surgery, you get your players together, they sit down, they roll their check, and everyone's watching the dice to see, oh my god, is this player going to be okay? Are they going to become blind? What's that going to lead to down the road, Because I know for a fact, if one of my characters went blind after fighting some fucking dystopian eldritch horror, then I am definitely going to have them in the darkness of that blindness, they will suffer terrible visions maybe, or, their dreams become different because they no longer see the light of day. Ultimately, surgery offers a second chance for your characters to avoid the permanent effects of some of the more dire lingering injuries. Now, this is a fairly straightforward thing, and it is. I am glad they have included it, because a lot of injury systems that I've seen in the past, and I'm just talking about like commons on D&D Beyond and stuff like that, they don't cover the recovery of the injury. It's great to help a DM give players injuries, but if you're writing a homebrew system to give players injuries, you have to include a method to remove them. Like, not every DM is going to know that, a festering wound can be cured by maggots, but if it's a simple one-line comment saying this can be cured by visiting a barber surgeon who can put maggots or leeches on the wound, it is very, very important that the treatment is considered as great as the injury in some cases. So bear that in mind. You don't want to just be like, yeah, go visit the barber surgeon, roll your dice, done. You need to set that scene for the surgeon. You need to really make it that, oh my god, my arm is hanging off, I need to get it fixed. And you have to think risk and reward. Are all adage again. Risk and reward. Am I willing to go to this barber surgeon and let him slice half my arm off and possibly lose the entire arm? He might just look at it and go, that has to go. Or do I wait? Do I try and hold on until we get to the magical cleric, for example? And, magic's a whole different thing. So it's nice to have a grim kind of treatment method. In the Forgotten Realms, for example, clerics are rare. They are not something that's very common. You look at Baldur's Gate 3, for example. How many clerics do you meet in that campaign? Not a lot. So my advice would be, when you're using a system like this, make clerics rare. If there's one in the party, have people treat them as rare, because magical healing should be something that's quite rare. Now, on magical healing, we're going to move on now to part 3. And this is the most important part of the book in my humble opinion, as someone who's done Grimdark campaigns for a long time. But essentially, despite your character's best effort to prevent them, permanent injuries are going to occur. The final part of this book contains a variety of options, both magical and mundane, focused on accessibility so that no physical limitation will stand in their way. Now, the magical healing part, they actually have quite a good bit of information written here that you can consider. Now, Maxwell says, magical healing is a fickle thing, my friend. I've travelled far and wide, studied with clerics and scholars, and let me tell you, it's a rare spell that can do what I can with a scalpel and some catgut. Your humble teacher Maxwell has been in 1 or 2 scraps himself and seen a thing or 3. Magical healing is great for getting you back on your toes in a pinch, but sometimes it responds oddly. Most often it seals up your wounds lickety-split without so much as a weal or welt left behind. Other times you're left with a wicked-looking cicatrix that looks like it's been with you since the time you played with Daddy's sheep shears as a child, even though he told you not to. Now, and mind you, this is still just a theoretical postulation. I believe that magical healing, to its capacity, acts on the reflected image of oneself that lies deep within our inner soul. When a particularly grievous wound is taken, it damages not only our physical body, but our spiritual sense of self. It traumatically changes our inner perception, and when we receive magical healing, that perception is outwardly reflected on our body. So simply put, see stars, get scars, right? Now, this is such an interesting piece of information. And anyone who watched my last video will know I talked about corruption. So the 3 ways to damage characters and introduce the deteriorating asset theory, we'll call it, is to attack a character's mind, their body, and their soul. And here it talks about how a physical injury can impact on a character's soul. So that's interesting in a way that you could link that in with your homebrew corruption system, Maybe one of the corruption mechanics could be that magical healing has a lesser effect on you because your soul is so battered from the horrors it's witnessed. But it does go on to list specific spells in D&D that should be changed to help deal with introducing this book into your campaign. So taking that, okay, the Regenerate spell. It says the Regenerate is a 7th level spell available to the Bard, Cleric, and Druid that threatens to make the entire lingering injury system obsolete. Where is the threat when a 13th level character can cure even the direst of injuries with the only cost being a night's rest? While most campaigns are played between 4th and 12th level, if you enjoy the system and want the DM for a higher level campaign, you may want to alter the Regenerate spell as follows. And then it goes on to list how you should change the spell. And I've looked at them, they're very, very minor changes. They're not anything game breaking, the spells still have value. But it does go on to, it brings up an interesting question. And this is probably for another video. But how can you grimdark campaigns with high level characters? And, I've had many comments on my last video, and they were some of them are so wonderful, and I loved reading all of them. I tried to reply to as many as I could. But one person there said that, fear of death is a very real thing. When you're playing a TTRPG. I mean, for different reasons. If you're playing a normal high fantasy campaign, your fear of death is simply you don't want to lose your character. But introducing the real fear of death all the time, that risk versus reward again, you begin to create a stress within the player. Or maybe not even the player, but the character. You shouldn't be stressing out your players. You should be stressing out your characters. And higher level D&D can be very, very tricky with that because the things they're fighting now, But I play into that. A great way, and I will cover this in another video because it's not really super relevant now, but essentially, one bit of advice I'll give you on that is think of The Boys, the show The Boys. It's about these superheroes, mainly Homelander, etc., who are all pieces of shit, and they do horrible things, and they're almost invincible. When you get to a higher level, you should do that with characters. You stop attacking, you stop attacking their bodies, and you really begin to hone in on their corruption, because the time they reach 13th level, they should be dark, demented individuals, and you should be encouraging them almost to begin to become the villain that they fought. It's like that old saying. What was it? You either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. That's what I think. That's how I think you handle Grimdark high level campaigns. But moving on, I'm super sidetracked now. Okay, I won't go into the regenerate spell, but I will say this: interaction with injuries. Okay, and when I say this, I say I'm reading this. Though the DM always has the final ruling, magical healing is intended to be ineffective at treating lingering injuries, unless the treatment section of the lingering injury chart specifies otherwise. Narratively, the magic is considered ineffective at treating the source of the injury or effect. For example, magical healing fixes up the damage from a standard longsword wound without any trouble, but can't knit together a broken bone. Now, this I get from this that it's really up to the DM. Like it says there, though the DM always has the final ruling. And I agree with this. You should gauge your players. If one player has built their entire character around healing, someone says, I want to be a life cleric and I want to just heal people, I'm a pacifist, that's my whole thing, that's no problem. Because you can't just rely on injuries to Grimdark campaign. Like, you can't just give people infected neck wounds and take away their agency to heal it, because you're stripping that character of what the player wanted them to be in the first place. Now, of course, you can provide limitations to direct players on the road you're building for the campaign, but it's important that if a character is built that way, you let them do what they want, and so that they're not feeling undermined. You just focus on other aspects, insanity and corruption. That's why we attack the player's mind, body, and soul. I should say character. But essentially, if injuries become something that magical healing, you have to heavily influence how your characters react with injuries. They don't focus so much on them. If they happen, and then the cleric is like, I should be able to heal this, and the whole table agrees, let them, because in the end of the day, you have other avenues to bring that Grimdark. You have atmosphere, you have got corruption, you have insanity, you have. If they have somebody who's constantly attacking them and it never affects them, they go, oh well, like chop this fella's arm off and now it's back or whatever, or he doesn't have to bother him. Have them attack the NPCs the players love. You got to get creative with this, and you can't let a character built heavily around magical healing just completely derail your setting, because when it comes to injuries, because you have avenues to approach from different perspectives. So remember that. Okay, so I've waffled on for 20 fucking something minutes now, right? Let's actually get down to how you actually use the lingering injury system. I'm going to start with part one of this, okay? It's called lingering injuries. It's the whole how you do it process. So, when do characters roll on the lingering injury table? There are two different circumstances that will cause characters to roll on the lingering injury table. Now remember, you are in control of this, so you can decide which parts of this you want and what parts you want to add in. Personally, I've added in when they reach 0 health, they also roll on the lingering injury table. I have added that in myself, okay? I thought it was necessary, but it might not be. There are two different circumstances that will cause characters to roll on the linger injury table. Critical hits and critically failed saving throws, okay? So, anytime one of your characters receives a critical hit from any source, which is combat, traps, spell attacks, etc., they roll 3d6 on the table that matches that damage type. If the critical hit deals more than one type of damage, they roll on the table for the type that dealt the majority. For critically failed saving throws, anytime one of your characters critically fails a saving throw that would cause them to take damage, including spells, traps, environmental effects, etc., they roll 3d6 on the table that matches that damage type. If the failed saving throw would cause them to take more than one type of damage, they roll on the table for the one that had the majority, okay? So, it's nice and simple. Really, really easy. Easy to implement, easy to remember. Just the other night, I had one of my characters who's going through her own thing, cast Vicious Mockery on one of the other players. He rolled a natural 1 for the save of Vicious Mockery. So then he took psychic damage. And I think he rolled an ability where the psychic damage infuses with the magic that's already inside him. And then you have to roll on the body chart to see where it affected. His hand now has become infused with the psychic energy, and it's affected him, and that his hand changes with his personality. It's like a minor illusion spell. So some of the injuries are quite creative and wouldn't be what you'd expect them to be, but they're very, very fun. Now, like I said, I've also added in that when the character falls to 0 HP, they also will roll on this table. Here's the step-by-step. You roll on the lingering injury table. Then you roll on the anatomy table if needed. Then you narrate the injury and its effects. That's important. I actually struggle with this part myself. I kind of go, there's your injury, moving on. I need to knuckle down on how the injury actually takes place. And then there's the treatment step, if there is one, if applicable. So going through them. So let's say you were attacked by, I don't know, let's say an ogre. An ogre comes at you with the bludgeoning damage of a club. He smashes you, he does a critical hit, okay? So now, the characters receive the critical hit, or critically fail to save and throw. You go, bludgeoning damage, roll me a 3d6. So it actually says here, allow them to roll. So they roll the damage, okay? So on Foundry, it's a little different. Sometimes I roll it for them, but if they're at the table, you could definitely just let them roll fairly easy. They roll their 3d6, and then you look at the injury. So I'm just going to jump straight down to the bludgeoning table, okay? Here's the bludgeoning damage table, up to from 1 to 18. So let's just say he rolls an 8. He rolls a numb. No, let's go for something a bit more grimdark. Let's see, what have we got? Crushed limb, okay? So he rolls a 17. Roll on the large limb table. So there's a large limb table and a small limb table, I'm guessing. Your limb is crushed to the point of uselessness and permanently non-functional. There is a section in this book I will go over that goes through the non-functional aspects of what that means to a character. But if it isn't reconstructed, the limb will not regain functionality. Treatment, a DC 23 save limb surgery. Okay, so that's some scary stuff right there, right? So let's say, okay, oh my God, you've rolled a crushed limb. Now let's go down to the table, the large limb table, and find what exactly, where exactly I should say, this has happened to you. So then we go down to the large limb table. Let's say he rolls a d20 and he gets a 7. So he rolled a right arm above elbow. So now the right arm above the elbow has been dramatically crushed. That's essentially the entire arm. And that player then has to deal with that. So then running back to our step counter, you go, okay, so now we've done all that. Now we need to narrate the injury and effect. So then I say the ogre picks up his club and he gazes down at you with a gnarling snarl, and he swings, and you desperately try to raise your shield, but the club slides past the shield just in time and crashes into your shoulder and completely obliterates your arm, leaving it crushed and useless. Blood pumps from your arm and you drop to the ground. Yeah, I would probably add a prone condition onto a character after that, and I would most definitely make them roll on the insanity table too, for dealing with something like that. I would probably have a character, especially someone who needs their arms quite a lot. Like, one of my characters is an artificer, and creation is one of his ways to deal with the horrors he sees within the world. Having that ability removed from him, I would make him roll on the insanity table for that I've created. And I will cover those in future videos once I've tailored them a bit more. So then we go, okay, so the treatment aspect of it. Is there a treatment aspect for something like that? We know there is. There's a surgery that can be done. But is there any magic? It's not listed. Can magic help that? It's got the non-functional condition, so we could find the non-functional condition and see what that means, because there is an entire section about that. And we know that essentially non-functional means that that limb can't be used. So if that's the right arm and the right-handed, they can't use that for combat anymore. I would argue they can't even use it to cast spells. So that's a devastating attack for a character to go through. And hopefully you want that somewhere late in the campaign. And maybe super early could make it interesting. But yeah, so as you can see, it's a very simple system to use. And it's a very easy step-by-step process. And on Foundry, when it happens to them, when a critical hit happens to them, it pops up on the character screen to roll the injury. So, that's nice to have it there, you know. But okay, now I want to just do a little bit of talking about the damage explanations because I think they are wonderfully worded in this supplement. Okay, so I'm not going to read them all, but I'll read a few. I'll start with something basic like bludgeoning, as we just sound there. Is there any sound more dissonant than the crunch of a broken bone? Few types of damage are more efficient at taking your limbs out of commission than bludgeoning. Do not forget to assess your patient's noggin, though. An errant club swing can result in a nasty concussion or a ruptured eardrum. Most often, though, bludgeoning leaves you with the colourful parting gift of a black eye or a broken nose, not the prettiest accessory for polite company. So you could actually look at this and kind of have an idea roughly of what's going to happen when they suffer a critical hit. But let's take something a bit stranger, like radiant damage, okay? So I'm still in the process of studying the enigma of radiant damage. The blindness I can treat, the mild burns I can treat. What I do not yet understand, why some patients come to me with a soft, unearthly glow or hair loss. Fear not, though, in time I shall find a merry cure to these as well. And that's an interesting one, you know, like because it talks about how radiant is an unusual source of damage, and because there's so many spells that do radiant damage, but now when you have kind of a radiant attack on somebody, it makes it more interesting, you know. And then, like, I thought necrotic was an interesting one as well. If you want to see the most harmful effects of necrotic damage, look inward, not outward. Necrotic damage erodes the soul. Necrotic damage is misery, and misery loves company. Treat what you can, but be aware your patient may need a cleric more than they need a surgeon. That's beautifully worded and makes a ton of sense. And like I said, if you're like me, you've homebrewed a corruption system, you can tie that in with your corruption system, giving necrotic a whole different sort of terrifying damage, you know, perspective, and it can really single out those like the evil of a necromancer and the negative energy rays they're spewing. So on that note, I want to actually have a look at an entire damage table to show you what might be on it. So I'm just going to pick necrotic damage because I think it's probably the most interesting one there. So number 3, you roll your player rolls a 3d6 to see what they get, and they see 3 snake eyes. They see 1, 2, 3 ones down. This is what they get. Corrupted soul. You bore witness to a deep darkness, and even now you can feel its touch lingering on your soul. Your alignment shifts one step towards evil. If you are already evil, treat this roll as 15, okay? So 15 is Phantom Limb. We'll get to that. But I would just give them a corruption point on my corruption table instead of, because I don't use alignments, so to speak. I think alignments have value in a Grimdark campaign, but when you run a campaign like that, you have to be much more willing to accept characters' grey areas. And I think having a lawful good character in a Grimdark campaign is incredibly challenging. And if you're pushing them in the direction of, you know, like they're becoming more corrupted by the world, and they're becoming more insane and more damaged individuals, you know, seeing that shift from lawful good down towards chaotic evil or lawful evil or neutral evil, or even just towards a neutral apathetic character, that is important for character development. And the corruption table does that to a certain extent. But yeah, in this situation here, corrupted soul, I would handle that on my homebrew corruption system. But if you don't, you can simply just use this one and go straight to 15, which is Phantom Limb. So roll on the large limb table. The limb is pale, bloodless, and dead, yet somehow you can still move it normally. The limb emits a faint aura of necromancy. You can suppress this effect with an effort of concentration. This renders your physical limb inanimate, and a ghostly phantom limb appears within it, staying attached to you. This incorporeal limb can pass through creatures and objects, interact with both the material and the border ethereal plane. If the phantom limb ever spends more than 6 seconds inside an object, it flickers from existence and you take 1d6 force damage. Treatment. Any spell that returns the dead to life will return your limb to normal, provided you follow the spell's normal requirements. So that is an interesting effect. It actually is not really so much of a mechanical punishment or negative effect. It's more of a RP negative effect in that, you know, people could detect the necromancy emanating from you. But at the same time, it does offer you some cool new abilities like been able to reach into a different plane of existence, for example. So it's cool, and a player might not actually want that to be fixed. So if a player did get that, I would make sure to tell them of the RP implications that will arise from that injury, and I would give them. I would probably have things happen to them, like when they enter like a holy church of Tyr, they might have the arm begin to tingle and feel extremely uncomfortable, and I might even give them a disadvantage to concentration checks or something like that while they're in that church, So bear that in mind. Some of these are RP centric. Let's say just one more slashing damage for the crack, right? So once again, player gets 3 ones. Roll to randomly determine your left or right eye. You've taken a grievous wound across this eye. It is non-functional, and if not treated within 12 hours, your vision will be permanently missing. So treatment a DC 20 save surgery. So once again, incredibly debilitating for a character. No jump to 15 if they're already elite, already evil. So that's good to know. So you can kind of get the gist of how they work. And then obviously then there is an anatomy table here. So you can see that there's a hugely detailed D100 body area. Right here, you can see if you roll a 55, for example, it's left arm to elbow. So it's very specific for the scar chart. But then if you go down to like the further anatomy tables, like the large limb table, you get the entire left leg, the right hand, the left leg above the knee. And if you go to the small appendage table, you get the left pinky toe and the right finger. Now, I've talked quite a lot about the damage table. I think you guys can read that in your own time. This video is already getting much longer than I originally intended. So I'm going to shoot on now to the non-functional and missing conditions. And I'm going to read this out because it's important you understand this before implementing this system. Maxwell's manual introduces 2 new conditions, non-functional and missing. These 2 conditions are the same in terms of how they affect characters mechanically. They may differ, however, in how the injury is treated surgically, or what types of items are available to characters to assist their injury. If the distinction is important, it will be listed in the surgery or items description. Non-functional describes a limb or sense that has been damaged to the point where it ceases to function. A leg broken by a great club, ears temporarily deafened by a violent percussive attack, or fingers in the early stages of frostbite are considered to have the non-functional condition. Missing describes a limb or a sense that is permanently gone, destroyed, or otherwise unattached from the body. An arm severed by the mighty swing of a greatsword, a leg incinerated by the flame of a dragon, or an untreated spray of acid into a character's eyes are all considered to have the missing condition. The following table describes the mechanical effect that non-functional or missing body parts have on the player. No, some of these effects are the same as the lingering injury table found on 272 of the DMG, Dungeon Master's Guide, while others are expanded on or completely new. If playing with Maxwell's manual, it is recommended that you only use the effects listed here. Okay? But then there's stuff like the remarkable adaptability of a human dwarf. Now, I am going to say this is important, but bear in mind that if you're using the deteriorating character theory, as I'm calling it, this can somewhat undermine that a little bit, but not entirely. One of my characters in my current campaign is one-legged. He lost his leg in a character backstory relation that I will not mention. But essentially, he has grown to adapt to that as if he always had that because it was years ago. So don't be too quick to implement this part, but definitely do make sure you're slow about it. It should take years for somebody to become completely normal after that. So the remarkable adaptability of the human and elf and dwarf, etc. body. So the human body is an incredible thing, and the human will even more so. The longer a person lives with an injury or disability, the more they are able to adapt to it. Many of the penalties listed here may be able to overcome with practice, training, and resilience. Maxwell says, I once in the folly of youth made the lamentable error of challenging a man missing an arm to an arm wrestling competition. Little did I consider his normal day involved doing the same work with one arm than I did with 2. Long story short, I ended up setting my first broken bone. And that's completely reasonable. And you've got like how it affects your vision, your hearing, like what mechanical effects it has, like hearing. You have disadvantage on wisdom, perception checks, etc. Speaking, you cannot speak. It gives you kind of like the phalanges, the fingers, like what exactly happens when when you've got reduced amount of fingers, your lower body, as in your phalanges, your toes. Like it actually has a table for if you're missing 5 to 8 toes, it affects you. Like I mean, oh sorry, when you have 5 to 8 toes remaining or 4 or less toes, like it's a big deal. But yeah, it's a very very interesting system, and I have to say it's very very good in that the detail they've put into it to help your characters hate their lives. Part two, surgery. Now I'm not going to go too into detail with this one, okay? Because I view the surgery part of this as an optional take that you can read. You don't have to bring that surgery flavor in. I mean, obviously, if you come to this supplement, you are looking to introduce injuries. And I would heavily encourage you to use the surgery rules, but you may not. You may decide, no, my characters just won't access surgery like that. They'll rely on magical healing only, and that'll give your cleric a whole lot more appreciation in the party. However, there is kind of like there's prepping the patient, there's initiating surgery, there's assisting with surgery. So like you can, like for example, a character proficient in wisdom medicine may assist the surgeon by assessing the patient's condition. After max hit points damage is done, they may roll a wisdom medicine check, and then you can actually tell them what they know. They know the patient's exact HP. That's all stuff you would read yourself and wonder how it slides into your own campaign. And then there's a list of common surgeries like general surgery, save sense surgery, save limb surgery, and amputation. So you can see all of that there. And then there's actually like an entire example surgery. So this is literally a conversation between an NPC, a player, and the DM talking about it. And I imagine it's quite useful. And then there's part 3, which is the items and accessibility. So like prosthetics and stuff like that. Stuff that's, once again, modular to your campaign. Like how does it slide into your campaign is completely up to you. Are there prosthetics? Are there not prosthetics? Are you somewhere in the middle of a steampunk sort of run where prosthetics are incredibly common? That's up to you. But like a cane, how a cane affects you, a captain's hook, to replace a hand, crutches, an air trumpet for people who are gone slightly deaf, like the dwarf and the hobbit, iron sights, shield strap, all stuff to help your characters, kind of tools to help your characters overcome the injuries that they've had. And I mean, let's be honest, like a character being forced to use a cane, that is just screaming RP potential. That makes your character so unique when you have to go and get a great cane, and maybe down the line they get a kill magical cane or a sword cane, which is listed there, by the way. A strap-in saddle, if for whatever reason, if your brand are broken. It's just it brings an interest to your character, a diversity and uniqueness that just separates you from other characters. You could have 6 human fighters in one party, and they could all have different quirks and injuries from playing 15 sessions of the campaign. And all of a sudden, they all become very different. Like somebody needs an air trumpet. Oh, that's Donnie the Deaf, and you've got the guy who can't walk anymore, and that's Marcus the Cripple who needs straps to ride on his horse. Brand the Broken style, and it brings that kind of energy to the campaign that I think that you can bring that kind of grim humor to it too. Like an ethereal eye, that's a magical item. So yeah, there's all different things here you can go through, and like I said, it's all very circumstantial to what's going on in your campaign. And then on the last note of this entire system, I'm going to read this Maxwell's farewell part. So, well, my pupil, you've been burning the midnight oil at both ends, and old Hackwells is proud of you. Open the back packet of this manual to find enclosed your honorary graduation scalpel. It is my sincere hope that you will find that while using it, you are fondly reminded of our time together. If I leave you with one thing, I want it to be a deep instilled feeling that it is worth it to help others. Both crutches and kind words can help people get back on their feet. Giving a person their hearing back means nothing if you're not willing to listen to them. And finally, if I ever find out you've torn down a child because they can't pay for treatment, I will personally hunt you down and beat you with my surgical stick, patent pending. Good wishes, good tidings, and may your injuries never be greater than your strength of will. And then it goes on to say all this. And a note from the author, which I think, considering this guy wrote this book to and handed it out for free, put this much work into it and did it for free, I think they deserve a special mention. I really do. I hope you enjoyed Maxwell's Manual of Malicious Maladies. It has been a project of mine for quite a while, and nothing would be more rewarding to me than to know people are using it and enjoying it. If you have any particular notable stories, I would love to hear them. Email me at maxwellsmanual@gmail.com with stories, thoughts, comments, or just kind words. Happy adventuring. Now, I have to say, I am probably going to drop this person an email, because I'm incredibly grateful that they made this and they handed it out for free to the community. And like obviously the Foundry automation and stuff like that. I have to say, it's a phenomenal supplement. I highly recommend it. I give it, honest to God, for the detail, I give it a 9 out of 10. I never give a 10 out of 10 because I'm a pretentious prick. But a 9 out of 10, and I have to say, it's a phenomenal piece of work. And thank you, Maxwell's Manual creator. I know I said the name at the very, very beginning, but it's been 47 minutes according to my recording here, which it won't be once it's edited. But content design and editing was Thomas Pfeiffer. So, Thomas, thank you for this amazing book. And the art direction and consultation of Lakeisha, thank you very much. And Best Boy Terry, well done, amazing. And there's a ton of special thanks too. So, yes, Maxwell's Manual of Malicious Maladies and Miraculous Medicine. 100% recommend it. Give it a go. Let me know in the comments if you have another injury system you'd like me to talk about, or if there's an injury system you think is better or worse, or maybe you've used this particular system and you just want to tell me a cool story about it. Put it in the comments and then send it to my good friend Thomas here, because he deserves it after all the work he's put in. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe on the video. Thank you. Like I said, my last video did a lot better than I expected it to. I'm not really a YouTube creator by nature. I am a streamer though, and I do stream my Twitch campaign, Hate Reigns in Harkoven. And I would highly recommend checking it out if you like Grimdark. I do implement this system in it, plus my own homebrew systems of corruption and insanity, which I will cover in future videos. I understand I have an incredibly thick Irish accent, and I had some comments about that. None negative, by the way. So if I speak too fast or you guys have trouble understanding me in these videos, please do drop in the comments and let me know. It helps me in my creation of further videos. Thank you very much for listening to this very, very long video. It has been way longer than I intended. Live in grim darkness, my friends, and I'll see you next time.